Welcome to my channel, Most Worth Coins WC, where history lives in your hands. If you're passionate about rare coins, vintage currency, and the fascinating stories behind them, you're in the right place. Don't forget to watch the full video, share it with your fellow collectors, like, and subscribe to stay updated with more valuable content every week. So let's get started. The 1965 Washington quarter marks one of the most significant turning points in the entire history of United States coinage, both in terms of composition and monetary policy, as it represents the very first year in which the Washington quarter was struck in copper-nickel clad rather than the traditional 90% silver alloy that had been used since the series began in 1932. This dramatic shift was not simply a technical change, but the result of major economic forces, particularly the rising value of silver in the early 1960s, which had created a widespread coin shortage across the nation as Americans began hoarding silver dimes, quarters, and half dollars for their intrinsic value rather than spending them. As a response, Congress passed the Coinage Act of 1965, which eliminated silver from quarters and dimes and reduced silver content in half dollars, permanently altering the face of American coinage. Thus, the 1965 Washington quarter stands as the first of a new era, a coin that would look and feel nearly identical to its silver predecessors but would instead be made of a much cheaper combination of copper and nickel bonded to a pure copper core, giving it the silvery appearance necessary for public acceptance while solving the problem of rising costs for the U.S. Mint. On the obverse, the 1965 quarter continued to carry the well-known portrait of George Washington, designed in 1932 by John Flanagan. The bust faces left, showing Washington's strong profile, tied hair, and classical Roman-style features that were chosen to convey dignity and statesmanship. Across the upper rim is the bold inscription Liberty, while to the left of Washington's neck appears a national motto, "In God We Trust." The date 1965 appears directly below the bust, anchoring the coin to its year of production. Notably, coins of this year do not carry any mint marks, regardless of whether they were produced in Philadelphia or Denver. This was a deliberate policy decision by the Mint, which temporarily suspended the use of mint marks from 1965 through 1967 in order to discourage coin hoarding during the nationwide shortage. As a result, all 1965 quarters appear to have no mint mark, even though they were struck in multiple facilities. The reverse of the 1965 Washington quarter continues Flanagan's classic heraldic eagle design, which had adorned the quarter since the 1930s. At the center of the reverse is a bold eagle, the national bird of the United States, perched with wings spread and prepared for flight. The eagle clutches a bundle of arrows in its talons, representing strength and readiness of defense, while beneath it rests an olive branch, symbolizing the nation's desire for peace. Above the eagle's head stretches a curved inscription, United States of America, while directly below it appears a Latin motto, E pluribus unum, out of many, one, a phrase that embodies the unity of the states forming one nation. At the bottom, the coin's denomination is spelled out clearly as quarter dollar. The overall design is restrained and dignified, meant to convey authority, tradition, and American ideals on a coin that would pass through countless hands every day. Physically, the 1965 Washington quarter introduced a new clad composition that would define circulating U.S. coinage for the next half-century and beyond. Instead of silver, the coin was made with an outer layer of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core, resulting in a sandwich structure visible when viewing the coin's edge. The coin weighs 5.67 grams, has a diameter of 24.3 millimeters, a thickness of about 1.75 millimeters, and a reeded edge consisting of 119 tiny grooves designed both as a security feature and as a link to its silver predecessors. Although the new clad quarters looked remarkably similar to the silver versions, their lighter ring when dropped and their visible copper stripe along the edge provided a clear difference to experienced eyes. Mintage of the 1965 Washington quarter was extremely high, as the Mint worked tirelessly to alleviate the coin shortage. Over 1.8 billion quarters were struck with a 1965 date, making it one of the most common issues of the series. Because of this, 1965 quarters remain very easy to find today in circulation, though most examples are heavily worn. In circulated grades, their value is simply face value, 25 cents, because of the enormous mintage and lack of silver content. However, collectors do seek out well-preserved examples in mint state condition, where the coin retains its original luster and sharp strike. At higher grades such as MS-65 and above, a 1965 quarter can carry a modest premium, and superb gem specimens can be valued significantly higher due to the difficulty of finding fully lustrous, mark-free pieces from such a heavily used issue. Proof-like or experimental transitional pieces, such as 1965 quarters accidentally struck on leftover 90% silver planchets from 1964, are extremely rare and command thousands of dollars at auction, making them one of the most famous era variety finds in modern U.S. coinage. The historical context of the 1965 quarter is particularly important. This coin was released in the same year that President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Coinage Act into law, fundamentally changing America's relationship with its circulating coinage. Prior to this, Americans had grown accustomed to coins containing precious metal, which gave them intrinsic worth beyond their face value. The 1965 quarter, however, symbolized a shift toward modern money as purely fiduciary instruments, backed by trust in the government rather than by their metallic content. This change reflected both practical necessity and the economic realities of the time, when the rising demand for silver made it unsustainable for the mint to continue issuing millions of ounces of the precious metal into everyday commerce. Overall, the 1965 Washington quarter is a coin of enormous significance not because of rarity or precious metal content, but because of what it represents. It is a dividing line between the classic silver era and the modern-clad era of U.S. coinage. For the everyday American of the mid-1960s, the 1965 quarter may have seemed like just another coin used in payphones, laundromats, and vending machines, yet behind a familiar design lay an important story of national adaptation to economic realities. For collectors today, it stands as a historically rich piece, common in circulated grades but symbolically powerful as a first-clad quarter and occasionally highly valuable when found as a rare era struck on a silver planchet. It carries forward the timeless imagery of George Washington and the heraldic eagle while simultaneously marking the dawn of a new age in American money, ensuring its place in numismatic history as one of the most pivotal issues of the 20th century. The 1968 Washington quarter is an important coin in the long-running series of United States quarters bearing the portrait of George Washington, and it reflects both a continuation of national traditions and a shift in the materials and minting practices of American coinage. On the obverse, the coin features the enduring left-facing bust of George Washington, designed in 1932 by sculptor John Flanagan to honor the bicentennial of Washington's birth. By 1968, this portrait had already been used for more than 3 decades and was deeply familiar to Americans, a constant reminder of the nation's first president and his symbolic role as a father of the country. At the top of the obverse design is the inscription Liberty, a bold and simple declaration of one of the founding principles of the United States. Just to the left of Washington's portrait appears the motto, "In God We Trust," a national declaration of faith and identity which had been appearing on U.S. coinage since the 19th century. Below the bust is the date of mintage, 1968, anchoring the coin to its historical context during a turbulent decade in American history marked by the Vietnam War, civil rights movements, and cultural transformation. Unlike coins minted from 1965 to 1967, the 1968 Washington quarter reintroduced the use of mint marks, small letters identifying where the coin was struck, which had been suspended for a brief period as part of the mint's effort to discourage hoarding. Thus, quarters from this year may bear a D mint mark for Denver, an S mint mark for San Francisco, or no mint mark at all, which indicate production of the Philadelphia Mint. The reverse of the 1968 quarter continues a heraldic design also crafted by John Flanagan, steeped in American symbolism. At its center is a bold depiction of the American bald eagle, the national bird of the United States, standing proudly with wings partially spread as though prepared for flight. The eagle clutches a bundle of arrows in its talons, a long-standing emblem of military strength and the nation's readiness to defend itself, while beneath the arrows is an olive branch, symbolizing the American desire for peace. Above the eagle's head arc the inscription United States of America, with the Latin motto E pluribus unum, out of many, one, inscribed just below, underscoring the unity of the states into a single nation. At the bottom of the design, the denomination is spelled out in full as $quarter. The combination of eagle, arrows, and olive branch creates a carefully balanced message of peace and strength, and its prominent placement on the nation's everyday coinage reinforces patriotic themes for all who use it in commerce. In terms of physical characteristics, the 1968 Washington quarter was no longer made of silver, as the mint had transitioned in 1965 to a new copper-nickel-clad composition for all circulating quarters. This modern clad coinage featured an outer layer of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core, which gave the quarter a silvery appearance without the intrinsic value of silver. The coin weighs 5.67 grams, measures 24.3 millimeters in diameter, has a thickness of about 1.75 millimeters, and includes a reeded edge with 119 grooves to deter counterfeiting and fraudulent practices such as shaving precious metal from the edge. The San Francisco Mint also struck proof versions of the 1968 quarter, identifiable by the S mint mark and their mirror-like fields and frosted devices, which were specially made for collectors and never intended for circulation. Mintage figures for the 1968 quarters varied by mint. The Philadelphia Mint struck over 220 million quarters, while the Denver Mint produced more than 100 million, making both common in circulation and easily found even today. The San Francisco Mint produced around 3 million proof coins, which were sold directly to collectors as part of proof sets. Because of their high production numbers, the 1968 quarters from Philadelphia and Denver remain relatively common in circulated grades, with most examples still worth face value, just 25 cents, in worn condition. However, in higher mint state grades, particularly MS-65 and above, they can command collector premiums, often ranging from a few dollars to significantly more depending on strike quality and luster. Proof coins from San Francisco are also widely available but can fetch higher prices when exhibiting deep cameo contrast, where the design elements appear frosted against a highly reflective mirror-like field. From a historical perspective, the 1968 quarter is significant because it was part of the early generation of clad coinage that marked the end of silver circulation coins in America. Prior to 1965, all Washington quarters were struck in 90% silver and 10% copper, but the rising price of silver forced the mint to eliminate precious metal from circulating denominations. The 1968 issue represents the solidification of this new era, in which quarters became purely fiat-based instruments of commerce rather than partial stores of intrinsic metal value. For collectors, the year also stands out because of the reintroduction of mint marks, which had been omitted from all coins during 1965 to 1967 to prevent widespread hoarding amid the transition away from silver. This meant that 1968 quarters once again carried identifying letters, restoring a long-standing tradition in U.S. numismatics. Overall, the 1968 Washington quarter is a coin that, while not rare, occupies an important place in the history of American money. It bridges a divide between the classic silver era and the modern clad era, and its symbolism connects daily life in the late 1960s to enduring national ideals of liberty, unity, and strength. For everyday Americans of the time, it was simply pocket change used in payphones, vending machines, and daily purchases. But for today's collectors, it is a reminder of the historical moment when the coinage system fully embraced new metals and practices. In circulated condition, its value is modest, but in pristine mint state or proof examples, the coin becomes a desirable collectible that reflects both artistry and history. The 1968 quarter thus stands as a numismatic link between past and present, preserving the image of George Washington and the nation's heraldic eagle through a period of great social, political, and economic change in the United States. The 1985 D Washington quarter is a United States 25-cent coin struck at the Denver Mint during the mid-1980s, a time when the quarter was a staple of daily commerce and a critical part of the American coinage system. On its obverse, it carries the enduring portrait of the nation's first president, George Washington, designed in 1932 by sculptor John Flanagan to honor the bicentennial of Washington's birth. This design had by 1985 already been in use for more than 5 decades, becoming one of the most recognizable American coin portraits. At the top of the obverse is the word liberty, boldly arched above Washington's head, symbolizing the core American ideal of freedom. To the left of the portrait is the national motto, "In God We Trust," a phrase deeply tied to American identity and appearing consistently on U.S. coinage since the 19th century. Beneath the bust of Washington lies the year of mintage, 1985, and just beside it, slightly below Washington's ponytail, rests the D Mint mark, denoting the Denver Mint in Colorado where the coin was struck. The obverse engraving features sharp details of Washington's profile. His strong jaw, tied hair, and classical features all serve as a tribute to his stature as a father of the nation. On the reverse, the 1985 D quarter maintained Flanagan's heraldic design, rooted in neoclassical symbolism and American national pride. At its center is a majestic bald eagle, America's national bird, standing proudly with wings partially outstretched as though ready for flight. The eagle clutches a bundle of arrows in its talons, representing strength and the nation's readiness to defend itself if necessary, while below the arrows is an olive branch, signifying the country's desire for peace. Above the eagle's head arcs a national legend, United States of America, with a historic Latin phrase, E pluribus unum, out of many, one, inscribed just beneath it, highlighting the unity of the states forming one nation. Below the eagle is a denomination, $quarter, clearly stating its value as 25 cents. The reverse design, though simple in execution, carries profound symbolic weight, linking America's ideals of liberty, unity, and balance between peace and strength. In terms of physical specifications, the 1985 D Washington quarter was struck in the standard copper-nickel-clad composition used for circulation coins since the mid-1960s, an outer layer of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core. It weighs 5.67 grams, has a diameter of 24.3 millimeters, and a thickness of 1.75 millimeters with a reeded edge of 119 ridges, features that help prevent counterfeiting and coin clipping. The Denver Mint produced this issue in massive numbers, with a total mintage of over 460 million pieces, making it a very common date in circulation. Because of this high output, most 1985 D quarters hold little to no premium in circulated condition and are generally only worth face value, 25 cents. However, collectors place value on well-preserved examples, particularly those in mint state condition, MS65 or higher, where luster, strike sharpness, and the absence of contact marks make them desirable. A pristine, sharply struck 1985 D quarter with full mint luster can be valued at several dollars to much higher levels depending on grading. An interesting aspect of the 1985 D quarter is its place within the broader history of the Washington Quarter series. This was still well before the redesign of the 50-state quarters program, launched in 1999. Meaning that coins like the 1985 D remained the standard and familiar design in Americans' pockets for everyday transactions. During the 1980s, the U.S. Mint's quality control varied, and some coins from this era exhibit weak strikes or production flaws. Collectors often search for varieties such as double dyes, repunched mint marks, or off-center strikes, though no major varieties for the 1985 D are widely known, making its collectability generally tied to condition and grading. For historical context, in 1985 the price of silver was around $6 per ounce, so silver quarters had long been absent from circulation, having been replaced by clad issues since 1965. Still, the coin served as a critical part of daily transactions in an era when cash was a dominant medium of exchange, prior to widespread credit card and digital payment usage. Overall, the 1985 D Washington quarter stands as a product of its time, an ordinary workhorse coin of American commerce, but also a bearer of enduring national symbols. While its mintage numbers make it common and its base metal composition prevents it from being intrinsically valuable like earlier silver quarters, it remains important within the lineage of U.S. coinage. For collectors, it represents a continuing legacy of the Washington quarter design, a connection to the nation's history, and an affordable entry point into numismatics. In higher grades, the coin offers beauty in its crisp details and luster, while in circulation it carries a story of countless transactions, from vending machines to daily purchases, linking it to the fabric of everyday American life in the mid-1980s.